The USDA's new numbers for the October report and the markets tumbling down on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Jerry Gidel is ready to assess all of that right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we had the markets reacting negatively on Friday, especially for soybeans. But still, for corn and wheat, the numbers were higher if you count the whole week.
Oh, definitely. It was a positive week generally overall here. Weather in the Midwest is part of it. I think some Argentine issues down there continue to be dry too. Grab some attention here. Of course, uh, in the international world, for wheat, we ended up having this long talked about and rumored scenario here about big hefty sales from Russia to Egypt. They've been really wanting to get this thing nailed down, and that it's really the price has picked up a lot since they first brought this up here. Gee, so late August, early September, about buying about 3 million metric tons. Actually, it was higher than that, but they bought some, and then they added 3.1 million metric tons at this point, about 510,000 metric 510,000 metric tons per month from now November through April, and now they've already got 430 or something like that scheduled for this October period. So, things were really kind of buzzing along here. Once that announcement finally came through midweek, the markets have been a little sluggish. We've had some very good export numbers, by the way, on beans and corn, and that, but it seemed like we kind of ran into the idea that we really rallied a lot. Like, geez, I think on that wheat, we might have been pushing 50 cents or more. And on corn and soybeans, we had some good strength going. But the one thing that is always in these markets this time of year is that once you got a swing in them up, there's always fear there's going to be a huge sales from the country. I think there has been some minor ones at this point, but I don't think the producer out there feels like he knows exactly where his crop size is going forward here at this point from there. So I think this market still is in its discovery situation on the U.S. harvest at this point, but we won't get those numbers out until a week from today, I guess. Trade numbers are going to be put together early next week. About what expectations are. Definitely two sides of the coin. The old idea that big crops get bigger is still out there. While I think there's a lot of people, myself included, in this thing that's looking at it from a different angle, in the fact that we have really had limited moisture and above normal temperatures. And what I'm hearing about some of the moisture contents of the grains that are being delivered to elevators, including my own out in western Iowa, and that where one of my tenants actually delivered some beans at 9.5%. That's not helping my yield when you drop it to 3-4% under what's you'd love to see. But that's how things have progressed out there overall. So that's another feature we'll have to look at going forward here. But right now, we kind of took a little profit going into the weekend because limited. Right now at least there's still going to be a good harvest weekend across the whole Midwest, let alone East or West.
Well, and the reports are that for the state of Ohio, there is at least 85% of the state's planted surface is under drought, and there has been a lot of concerns about the fires there.
Yes, yes. And Ohio, by the way, has a certain percentage of uh, forest in the southwest part of the states, even south central. Dayton up through Columbus and on towards Cleveland and west is really where the primary part of agriculture is in Ohio. So, in general, here, Ohio's dry. There's some parts around northern Illinois that are in drought too. Indiana spotty back and up and down and that one. I kind of feel like that there's even some western areas of the country here that haven't seen a lot of moisture. But the key thing about drought at this time of year really isn't what it does is and particularly when you have above normal temperatures, what it does is really shrink down the moisture in the seed. And that's how quickly things have changed. We're just in the process of getting started here on harvest on an overall basis. And I'll guarantee that uh like farmers out there didn't want to harvest 9% uh soybeans. They want to be a lot closer to 13 because that's 4% more in your yield. So that's a scenario that's really starting to crop into this thing. And I think it's going to be a factor as we go into the actual USDA's numbers. Now, to some extent, it's really early and there's a lot of things that can change. And all of a sudden, the weather could reduce down in temperatures and the moisture could show up in the last half of October. But it really isn't out there in the expectations at this point of that factor coming through. So that's, I think, a really interesting situation here as how that all gets balanced out. And I don't want to give people's hope that all of a sudden the USDA is going to end up getting a real handle on this issue. I think it's the
So
scenario.
you are not seeing a major change in yields right now.
Oh, yes, exactly. All of a sudden here, if this thing continued on in a big way, this 184 kind of numbers that have been floating around, and there is people in the concept of it projecting that. I'm kind of leaning one bushel less from last month, but it might not show up until the November numbers here because, as I said, we got 21% was this week's harvest number. Now it's going to be higher than that on this coming Monday. But that in general, let's assume there's 70% or more still to go. So it's not going to happen and identify it out in the country even. So, but I kind of feel like that there is enough uncertainty and enough people pointing out this issue that I think some of the producers out there might be pulling back some of their numbers. And the USDA's sample sizes from the country are just going to be a leading indicator on both corn and soybeans. But both soybean moisture content and corn both have this same kind of insidious situation that happens. The last few years we've had a lot of that issue come into here. You assume that everybody's starting with 22% on the harvest on corn. Heck, a lot of them are starting at 17 because they don't realize it's 5% less than that. And all of a sudden, time you get to the end, it's a lot lower than they want. So it's really an interesting world out here these days. The weather situations, the latter part of our harvest, and that have really started to impact things in a big way.
And what about the trade numbers? This week we had the dock worker strikes lifted. That was good news. But still, we have plenty of numbers to be figured out for the export.
Oh, definitely. And they've had this kind of in the trade world in that Kazakhstan has become quite a significant performer or a producer in the wheat world, and that over the last 5 or 7 years. And they're a landlocked scenario, so they need to end up moving this by train into the Black Sea, or they need to end up moving it to the east on train. And guess what? Their friend, the Russians, are all sides of them. And there's been a tiff going on this week, and I don't know what. No one's really got it figured out here as to what causes it and what's going on and this kind of stuff. The Russians. After they made the big news about selling the big chunk of wheat uh, to Egypt, which that's a that's a relationship that's been going on for many, many years, and the Egyptians decided they just wanted to get a solid base under things. And from their point of view, they're looking at very cheap prices, and they'd rather end up having this started that. Now, the key to that is that the Russians weren't excited about doing it this way because if something does go wrong around the world, they're not going to be able to get higher prices if they sell it. But there's probably been a decent of advance from this time that this started back in August. So that's the real twist on this wheat situation. But this week, even we had some commentary coming out of Australia about issues over there in the western parts of Australia, getting drought and issues, and even some freeze damage, I think, on some of the stuff coming out of dormancy, that kind of stuff. So right now, there's a lot
It
more
sounds
uncertainty.
like it's not a good time to sell wheat.
It doesn't. We bumped right up against a magic number here in the wheat around the 630-ish level here, basis D's. And I kind of feel that's the 200-day moving average it ran into in that. So it's a situation where things could get a little more snappy going further into the fall here. So, but in the same situation here, the corn and soybeans are in front of a major report in October. Right now, personally, I think I'm looking at about a bushel less nationwide. In that, I've taken a couple bushels off Illinois, actually raising Iowa a bushel or so. But also at the same situation, I think the one thing that some people out there estimating on production numbers, they really kind of forgot what's happened with this Helene that moved up from the Florida Panhandle up through Georgia, Carolinas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and even Kentucky. That was a unbelievably bad
In
storm.
parts of Virginia.
Oh yeah, Western Virginia, all those areas there. I kind of feel like actually I'm looking for like 4 or 5 bushels less on corn and maybe a bushel and a half on beans in that area. So that's one of the if you're in that good big crops get bigger, you've got to at least tip your hat to what's happened in that particular weather event that's came through. But at the same time, on the bean side of things, it's uh, early yields are positive, but I'm not sure that there's the concept that we're going to find better yields and better bean crops further into the season because of the type of season we had, where we had, some moisture early, got things planted, then we had the rain, but then yes, the rain was positive for the seed bed, but at the same time, it also pushed a lot of acres being planted into that post 4th of July period, which has really been the tougher part of this thing, where all of a sudden, basically from July 15th on, a lot of areas didn't get enough rain for 2 months.
All right. I think we wrap it up. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Right. It'll be interesting to see what next Friday's numbers have to say. I think they're going to be down, as I said, be a bushel in corn and maybe 3/10 or so down on beans. But going down is kind of a different approach when everybody likes to think big crops get bigger. So I guess I'm still bucking the trend, still not in the crowd here with everybody that wants to think we got a big crop. Now, these are not going to change our ending carryover stocks hugely, but they're going the right way. And that's the first part we have to do.
All right. Thank you.
Take kind of still discussing the corn and the activity that's going on in that market here. There was an announcement today the Russians were going to go ahead and increase their export. Uh, I guess you call it tariff or whatever, tenfold and knew it up to 297 rubles, which is sounds impressive. I don't know exactly what the current value of the ruble is, but even then, it definitely is a indication that things in the eastern side of the Black Sea, where a lot of their corn and wheat is located at, is still not in the best of shape on weather, and they're kind of slowing things down. And actually, there was, I think, late last week, early this week, there was reports about some of the crops out in the Ural area and Siberia that was still in the field. So definitely, things are in the weather world for Russia are not looking the best. So I think they're getting a little nervous on some of that stuff along the way. Of course, the other, you know is the fact that we've got USDA reports coming next week and also on October 11th. From there, the one's next Monday, this coming Monday, I should say, is traditionally they don't really have a lot of impact. There's really not a lot of adjustments in corn and soybeans and wheat stocks, but I think there could be some slight increases. We kind of mentioned this last week that the U.S. crush was disappointing in August, so there's probably a 10 to 15 million increase on that. Back up from the in the 550 excuse me, 350, 55 area. On the corn, similar situation. It's always a little touchy this time of year on what kind of exports happen or don't happen on the exports and that on corn, and that with prices being so defensive in August and people possibly delayed some of their shipments, but not big. But there's also the scenario that last year's crop could be overestimated, so that's always going to be something involved on that one. And of course, then we have our final production numbers on winter wheat, spring wheat, things of that nature. There's a crowd out there that's 25, 30 million higher. There's a crowd like myself in the 15 to 20 million lower crowd. I'm still looking at some of the poor and hot weather poor conditions and hot weather we had in Colorado, Montana, even the Pacific Northwest a little bit on some of their late harvesting. And so I think that could be down, but it's not a big deal one way or the other. If it's 15 or 20 lower or 20 higher, it's the crop sizes and wheat are really going to be determined what's going on as we get our fall results here in corn and soybeans harvest, which will be picking up strongly here. There's expectations that the coming weeks harvest pace will be in the 20 to 23, 24% ratio up from the 12 to 14, 15% we had last week.
Yes, and next week we also might have a strike in U.S. ports that might disrupt the U.S. export.
Yes, it's interesting in this is not the New Orleans style strike. It's on our Boca type of exports and that got settled I think late last summer type situation. This really involves all kinds of other things that are dealing with our container ships, with our some food imports and that. But it's definitely psychologically something that's could have an impact on things. Maybe even in some of the specialty products and things like that, vegetable oils like that deal in that more specialized scenario. Definitely, it's going to be a big impact on containers and also on autos at this point and auto parts. So if you're buying an imported car, you might have less supplies to choose from if that continues. Now, there's a strong possibility that they will go ahead and have one of these 45-day cooling off periods and get back to the bargaining table, things like that. So that's definitely out there and something that we needs to be watched. But I until we actually get past October 1st, we'll see if that actually comes about. There's always this last minute brinkmanship that happens when they decide to throw in that 45-day cooling off period.
Yeah, so next week we'll have a lot to talk about. I'll see you next time, Jerry.
I understand, and I think we got to keep a little bit of an optimism that if we can get up closer to that 11, as I said before, 1080 to $9 or 1090 type level, or up in the 320, excuse me, 330, excuse me, 430 level on these corn, then there might be something to keep in mind. But right now, at least, let's see what happens with our data and the weather for next week, because I think both of them are important, both in South America and here in the U.S.
Indeed. Thank you.